Hey, Jefi, how are you?
I'm great, Ed. How are you?
I'm doing great. And
Good.
I got to imagine you're maybe perhaps a little jet lagged.
Just a little bit. Nice 15-hour flight home from Australia. So, but I'm doing okay.
That's great. And that kind of brings us to what we wanted to talk about today
That's right.
You know, as realtors, there's an old saying that, if you want to get busy, just plan on being out of town. And,
that's
and I
true.
saw that happening to you before you left. And it really it just went from 0 to 85 like that. Mm-hmm. So Jefi was in Australia for how long?
17 days.
Woo! Yeah, 17 days. And this was not a vacation. This was, family business that you had to be on.
Correct. Correct.
So it was working remotely and how to put your real estate career a little bit on remote control.
I know, which most people have never even thought of with this job because it's so boots on the ground. So it was definitely an incredible learning experience for me, which I'm excited to share the things I learned. And we also tried to do a podcast from there, but we couldn't get the internet to be strong enough to be able to do one. So that's why we're doing it now.
Yeah, we're doing it now. We tried it, but the kangaroos were not cooperating. So we weren't able to get a solid connection for
That's correct.
For that. But that's just as well. So we're going to dive into this. And there's three key points we're going to discuss, which is, we want to talk about kind of the systems, the technology, and then the biggest challenges you experienced. And again, this is for people to be able to apply when they're out of town and they want to keep things running. So,
right. This is not for agents who are going on vacation, because we've talked about that in a couple of our podcasts. This is about being able to work in a different location than where your business is running. So remote working.
Remote working, exactly. And it was really remote for you. So how many time zones again was it for you?
Well, oh my gosh, I think it's 16 hours ahead or 17 hours ahead. I always count backwards, but we're the day ahead of you. So that was one of the things. I would have to get up at 5 a.m. for it to be noon Pacific Standard Time.
Got it. So 5
or 3 p.m. Eastern Time.
Right. Mm-hmm. Wow.
So there was a lot of time where, clients were waiting for responses, which is where we're going to talk about kind of the systems we had in place. But one of the greatest things that I shared with my clients is, wait, just look at this as I'm working 24 hours a day for you. So whether it's, the team here on the ground or me there, you're getting 24-hour a day help.
Yeah. And how'd that go over?
They loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they really did get that. They got 24-hour a day care, which is not something I can give them when I'm at home.
Yeah. Yeah. Because your team could wake up and they had a full, things, you had taken care of things overnight and they had to-dos already assigned to them when they woke up. Boom, ready to go.
Correct.
Right out of the chute.
Yeah.
So let's dive into the systems, and we're going to break this down into procedures and people. So let's talk about that, about what you had to do there.
Okay. So this was really interesting because this was the perfect storm of things happening. My business partner had to go out of town as well for a family emergency. My husband and I had to go out of town for a family event that had to happen. And so both of us were gone, which has never happened in the 9 years that we've been working together. So, and on top of that, we had a huge influx of business come in about a week before I was getting ready to leave. Joe was already gone. So nothing like being in the fire and having to figure things out, which in some ways I think is so beautiful because it made me do things I've been talking about doing for a really long time. Right. So number one was making sure that my systems were in place. I use Trello and I use Slack for my systems, and I'm actually switching to Monday.com, which is something that's in the works, and we'll definitely talk about that because it's such a great organizational tool. Right. So all of my team had access to these places where I was communicating with them, so everything was in one place. I think that's a really big deal. You can't be sending texts, emails, Slack notifications. You have to have the place where everybody goes and gets the information.
Right. So
Okay.
you had a central communications center, if you will, or platform.
Correct.
That everybody knew where to go and where to get information. So critical.
Yes, super
critical.
important.
Yeah.
Super important. The next thing is that Joe and I restructured our team, and we didn't have a real buyer's agent on our team. And so we did have agents who we'd worked with that are incredible. So I sat them down in a round robin. There were 3 of them. And I said, look, here are the needs that I have. This is how I'm going to be paying for these things. Are you interested? All 3 were interested. I made one person the lead contact. And then that person, Lorraine, who did the most incredible job. I mean, 10 out of 10 stars is what I would give her.
Wow.
She then, if she couldn't handle something, would delegate it to the other 2 who were also willing to help. And so there was never a ball dropped. As a matter of fact, I think the 3 of them working together did a superior job to me when I'm on my own.
Wow.
Like my clients felt like they were absolutely taken care of.
Right. And I know we talked about the structure of that before you left, and we're batting around some ideas. And I think the really important thing that you did there is you had a single point of contact for
Very
the client.
important.
So there weren't these nebulous handoffs about who I'm working with. It was like, I'm your point person, and then she would backfill as needed.
Correct. Right. I think number one thing is the one person for the buyers. Now, my buyers had a contact person and my sellers had a contact person. Right. It wasn't the same person. So making sure that the client knew everything up front, like the roadmap podcast we did, they need to know and understand what's happening so nothing catches them off guard. They were so grateful for that. So there's number 1. Number 2 was the Slack channel that we used for each of the different clients and properties that we have listed, where all the information was in one place. So if anybody on the team needed to see something, it was in one place.
Excellent.
That was huge.
And then you had the people, and you didn't have them when this crisis hit or opportunity hit. You didn't have the people. One of the things we talked about is, when you have a breakthrough, there's a breakdown. And so you had a lot of stuff flying. Joe was out, systems that you've been relying on. It's different. There may have been some tears, but you were like, hey, this is an opportunity. And now you reshuffled the deck a little bit. And now look where you are. Look what you just said. It's like they got better care, right?
Yeah. Which is what you want for them. It doesn't have to be all about me. It needs to be all about them. And what's best for them was to have this incredible network working for them and doing what needed to get done. And there's a lot of stuff that I'll take from working remotely that I will actually implement while working in San Diego.
That's great.
I do want to say that, and you brought up the tears thing, which is interesting because I put up a pretty strong barrier of, I can do it. But I have this thing for my clients and the people that I serve that I never want to let them down. It is so deeply rooted inside of me that when I was put under that pressure cooker, I had to think of, what if they can't get a hold of this person? What if they can't do this? What if they can't do that? So I was thinking of all the what ifs, which ultimately helped me create a plan that I think was an amazing plan. And it executed over 17 days beautifully. I never had one person say to me, you really dropped a ball, Jefi. Like, no, they were all so excited.
Yeah, no, they were top notch. And I'll tell one little quick story before we shift over. And well, it actually kind of relates to technology, and we'll talk about that. Sure. But we were playing around with Monday.com on some of the technology pieces, and I was in there and changed the status, and Raquel immediately followed up on it. Like, hey, am I supposed to do something? I'm like, no, I just messed up on this new platform. So, and Raquel being Jefi's assistant.
My assistant. Yeah. So we were playing around in there, and my assistant was notified, and she contacted you, which again, Raquel too. We haven't talked about Raquel, Joe, and my assistant. I hate calling her my assistant or our assistant because she's so much more than that. Like, she's the manager.
Yeah, she's director of operations is what she is.
She's director of operations. Yes, exactly. So we can't call her assistant anymore because that's Yeah, she's so far
Raquel,
beyond
you
that.
just got a new title. There you go.
Director of operations. Yeah. So she really ran the show as the liaison for me through my sellers. So I was still handling all the contracts and any offers that came in and preparing listings and doing all of that. But she would be my middle person that would handle things from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. until I could step in at 1 o'clock.
Right.
So, and phenomenal job.
Yeah. Just you got a great team, and that's good things happen. So let's talk about the technology a little bit and how that enabled all this.
Okay. So, leave it to me to switch to a new system the second I'm leaving town, which is totally my MO. So I'm sorry, team, but I do that stuff. Anyway, so we switched to, I was in the process of switching to Monday. So Monday was a way for me to keep the to-do list really straight because I've used Trello, which I actually really like, but I think I've outgrown at this point. And so that part of technology allowed me to keep my interface with what was happening very clear and concise, where when I'm home, I keep a lot of stuff in my brain. That's easy. But when you're that far away and in a different time zone, it's not easy. So you need a very structured, good way to keep your to-do list organized, however that is for you. The next thing is then I would delegate, then I would follow up on the delegation. And by 5 a.m. my time, I could see everything that had been done via Slack.
Right.
And then I would go in and change it on my system. And the next working remotely will all be working out of Monday. But this time we had a crossover.
Right. And we'll be leaning into some of those automations and that's going to be a whole nother episode for folks because this is a really powerful platform. So, and then Zoom, you leaned in pretty heavily to that?
I did. I presented an offer to one of my sellers via Zoom while I was out of town. We ended up accepting that offer. And then I went through with them everything on the contract. So instead of being over the phone or in front of them, we did everything on Zoom, which I actually, and we've talked about this a little bit, I think doing a Zoom presentation of a contract is the most powerful thing that you can do with your clients because you're looking at it together. They're going to have questions. It's much easier than just sending them a DocuSign and saying, this is what this means, blah, blah, blah. You're really taking the time to coach and teach and lead your clients by doing it that way. So I highly recommend that and I learned that from you actually, doing that all the time.
Yeah, that's a great standard operating procedure. If they're next door, it works, because then you can share the document and go through it and answer those questions. Okay, so Zoom helped the technology platforms. Let's go to your biggest challenges. What was the biggest challenge the biggest challenges that you faced?
So my biggest challenge on this particular remote working was the fact that I have an East Coast client. So by the time I got going, it was between 3 and 4 p.m. her time. And she never expressed any frustration for that. But I think that as a consumer, I would be really irritated that I had to wait till the very end of my day to have that work, have that communication with my point of contact. So Raquel really helped with that a lot. And they're one of the clients lives here in San Diego. One lives on the East Coast. Nobody ever said, Jefi, you dropped the ball, or Jefi, I didn't like that. But I didn't like the way it felt because I felt like it was too long. So I will look into a solution for that. And I really don't know what it is at this point because you can't bend time. But either I would have had to gotten up earlier, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. on a couple days a week, which I would be willing to do if my client needed that. But that definitely was my biggest challenge. And the internet is just slightly slower. And so things took longer. So when I was in the multiple listings or I was preparing listing agreements or I was doing things like that, it took just a little bit longer than it does with the level of internet that I have here. Yeah.
So a little bit of technology lag and time zone issues. It's a little bit of an exception to have an East Coast client.
It is for me,
but something you got to be aware of, like how do you handle that? And
right.
So that's a good thought. So, and then you put a deal together while you were out there. So let's talk about the successes. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I got a couple of referrals while I was out of town. So I had my calls with them. One of those referrals I listed. So I listed a property without being here in San Diego. And I had my boots on the ground person go through the property and show the property to me, talk to me. Then I did my research. Then I talked to my boots on the ground person to make sure I was seeing everything correctly. And that property actually just hit the market today, and I got home yesterday, basically.
Wow. That is awesome. Pretty
exciting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you learned a lot of great lessons on this.
I sure did. And then I had an offer accepted too while I was gone, where I did the Zoom presentation. So I just feel like I left, my amazing team stepped it up. They did the deals. They did everything they needed to do. And the plane landed at LAX, and I picked up my phone and I just kept rolling. There was never a time that it wasn't rolling. And wow. I have always dreamt about a way to be able to work remotely, and to be able to do it on this trip showed me that with a little bit more fine tuning, I would be able to 100% do that.
That is awesome. And, your lead up, the dream came alive, right? And that is so cool that you were able to pull that off and lean into, your people and the process and the technology. So kudos to you, Jefi.
Yeah.
That was a big win. So we hope everyone can learn a lot from that. It is possible. It takes a little bit of planning, and we're here to help for that.
There you go.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.